All right, team. So we'll just kick back. We'll just kick back off again. And I think we've only got about 10 more minutes on our end in terms of our presentation, and then we'll pass it over to Shirleen and we'll go from there. So this is a particular category, which I'll disclaim from the outset, it's not necessarily my personal area of strength in regards to immigration, but we do have a consultant in which I was just talking to 10 minutes before our presentation in regards to these particular categories. So one of the questions was what kind of protections are there for people who come on partnership visas? Say, for example, migrants who come on partnership visas, and we'll quickly see what protections are afforded or what special visa categories are afforded for migrants who are subject to family violence. So next slide, please, Ivan. Gets a bit tricky here because there's two special visa categories that are available for migrants. The problem is they have to be, we'll unpack it, but the abuser partner has to be a New Zealand citizen or resident. So we'll just unpack that a little bit. But first of all, if your visa depends on your partner and your relationship ends due to family violence, there still may be other visa options. And these are the two special visa categories that we are available for people. And just want to reiterate that reporting the violence doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get deported. You'll still be able to, if you're eligible, apply for these respective visas, and you'll still have protections under the law. All right, but like I said, it's this tricky kind of caveat that your abusive partner unfortunately has to be a New Zealand citizen or resident. All right, so you can't access this particular special visa category if they're only on a work visa. So that's one of the key things. Are they a New Zealand resident or citizen? And if they've only come on a work visa, then unfortunately they can't apply for these special visa categories. But I will say how they can apply, which is a bit more difficult, but it can be pursued and has been in the past. All right. And what do we mean by family violence? Well, as we covered in the beginning of our presentation, Immigration New Zealand used the same definition of family violence as found in the Family Violence Act. Let's go to the next particular slide. All right, so let's say, for example, my partner is a New Zealand resident or citizen, and I've been subjected to family violence. I've come basically on a partnership visa. I can apply for the special temporary work visa, for lack of a better term, right? It's called a special work visa, and I've got to meet these particular 4 limbs that are expressed on the left side of the slide. So I was in a relationship and I had to plan to apply for residency on the basis of this relationship. All right, and now that the relationship has ended because of family violence, physical, psychological, social abuse, and now I need to work to support myself. I can apply to Immigration New Zealand to grant me a special work visa that enables me to work for 6 months. All right, it enables me to get back on my feet, to access any work. So it's an open work visa. All right, so I'm not just restricted to a particular job, because my partner could have been granted a work visa tied to a particular industry. This particular special work visa is open, so you can work anywhere, right? But in order to access, so you've got to meet that 4-prong criteria, but in order to access this particular work visa, you need to produce one of the 4 following pieces of evidence. So number 1, you can either produce a final protection order from the family court. Secondly, you can produce a conviction in New Zealand criminal courts from, proving that you were subject to this particular act of violence and your partner has been convicted from it. Thirdly, a report from the New Zealand police, right, and that they've investigated your respective incident and you've been subject to it, to this respective thing. And the last one is the statutory declaration, all right? So we'll unpack a little bit of what the statutory declaration means. But the thing is, so number 1, you meet the 4 prerequisites, and then you can produce any one of those 4 things: final protection order, conviction, report from the New Zealand police, or a statutory declaration, which says that you've been a victim of domestic violence, or sorry, family violence. So what is a statutory declaration? So next slide, please, Ivan. So statutory declaration is basically a written document that you complete in front of an authorized witness, so namely justice of the peace, or could be a lawyer, stating that you have experienced family violence in accordance with the definition that we said at the top of our presentation. Then you need 2 supporting declarations from professionals to state that they are satisfied that you have been a victim of family violence or family violence has occurred. All right, and these are some of the nominated or the sanctioned professionals that can make these declarations. So I can't just go to my uncle to say, oh, hey man, can you fill out the statutory declaration? No, they've got to be social workers, doctors, nurses, psychologists, counsellors, and experienced women's refuge or Shakti staff. All right, so remember, any one of those 4 things, so either can produce a final protection order, conviction, police report, or statutory declaration, that can enable me to actually get a special work visa, so I can work for 6 months and set myself up whether to apply for this particular visa or what we're going to the next one, which is the special residence visa. So next slide, please, Ivan. So remember, the first one is a special work visa, and the second one is a special residency category in family violence case, of special residency visa, right? And this has got the same, pretty much the same criteria. So number 1, you're in a relationship for a New Zealand citizen or resident, and you had applied or you had intended to apply for residency on that basis. You're subject to family violence. So those are the first 3 things. And then the 4th one is an interesting one. You can't return back to your home country because number 1, you've got no way of financially supporting yourself because you've been abused or excluded from the community because of social stigma. So Immigration New Zealand places a lot on the social stigma, right? And it's up to you to prove that a lot of the social stigma could be associated with family violence, being separated, solo parents, or just social stigma in your respective culture, building that respective case, all right? So that's kind of the criterion to actually meet the special residency category, right? And you also meet the health and character requirements for residency, all right? So obviously you need good health, but also that you have good character. So you don't have any outstanding warrants for your arrest, protection orders against you, or you've been called, in for as well. Just one more slide, please, Ivan. The next slide, please, Ivan. And the thing about this particular residence visa, is it enables you to live and work in New Zealand, and you can eventually apply for citizenship here. All right, so work is only 6 months, but the residency one here can extend for a set amount of time beyond that, but it importantly provides a pathway to citizenship. And another key thing about applying for this particular visa is that you can apply for both concurrently at the same time. All right, so you can both apply for the special work visa and the special residency visa if you've been subject to family violence. But if you're granted the special residency visa, it enables you to get assistance from working income to assist with your situation immediately, basically. So the evidence requirements for residential visa for the work is pretty much the same as a work visa, except that you need to provide evidence like why you can't return back to your country. And so the thing we want to encourage here is that you can apply for both concurrently, right? And the residency one is a pathway to actual citizenship, but you also get assistance from working income, which can be a very welcome relief, financial relief, especially at the time of of financial uncertainty because they've actually split up. So one of the key practical tips or tools in which you can advise your clients is that number 1, get that paperwork ready. Have copies of passports, have copies of birth certificates. If they know that there's pattern of behavior and they're willing to apply for that separate or special class visas to kind of stand on their own. Because obviously safety is paramount first and foremost, but you don't think of those things, like the little things like getting your passports, birth certificates ready when you're applying for Immigration New Zealand. It just makes the world of a difference when you have those documents ready to go. And basically, those are the 2, I guess, special category visas that are applicable as well. Last thing I do want to note is that what happens if my partner is not a New Zealand resident or a citizen, I did mention there's another pathway, but that pathway you have to write directly to the Minister of Immigration, and you'd have to appeal it on humanitarian grounds that, even though my partner is not a New Zealand resident or citizen, it's just here on a work visa. I'm planning to stay here for the reasons that I've suffered persecution, go back home, or social stigma. My kids are based here as well, we're settled. And those are the actual grounds, so humanitarian grounds that can only be appealed via the Minister's office. So it's a real tricky situation, but hopefully it's provided you two tools in terms of the special work visa and the special residency visa. But if your client is neither one of them, then there's a humanitarian ground that can be applied directly to the Minister of Immigration. So that wraps up migrant support, and I'll quickly pass it over to Lena in regards to what we have on offer or the criteria for legal aid, and then pass it over to Shirleen, and then we're good to go for the rest of the session.
All right, thank you. Ava, next slide, please. So what I really just wanted to touch on really quickly is obviously, and I've seen in the questions, the biggest question for all of our families is really the issue of cost. I'm not going to pretend by any measure that lawyers are cheap, and therefore it is really important that our community workers and our social workers know exactly who the legal aid lawyers are, okay? So legal aid is a government-funded service which provides legal assistance to those who cannot afford a lawyer. Legal aid is income tested, and this is where it can get a bit tricky, because you must generally be a New Zealand citizen, have permanent residency, but in some situations, people who are on visas can also apply for legal aid, and it really is a creature of circumstance. So what we would suggest to you is, if you have a client who really needs a lawyer and you can see it, is that you try and contact a legal aid provider and give them some overview about what kind of visa they have, all right? We do have, I know for sure that partners of people on work visas can apply for legal aid. So it's just about making sure that they meet the income criteria and they've got some ability to remain in New Zealand for the duration of legal proceedings. Legal aid lawyers are unfortunately very few and far between these days. There are groups of them in specific areas. We have a lot in South Auckland, not a lot in Auckland City, and then a lot in West Auckland. So it's about shopping around to see who does it. If you're a community provider and you're looking for a legal aid service, a legal aid lawyer, you can go on the Ministry of Justice website, and they've got search bars which will give you names of legal aid lawyers in your particular area. What I do want to say is that legal aid lawyers charge on a fixed fee basis, so they basically get amounts of money to run the proceedings through the course of the courts. Okay. What you need to be really aware of for your clients is legal aid should be treated as a loan and not a gift. There are some requirements on particular cases for your clients to pay the money back to the government. So they just need to be aware of it. It might technically not be a free service. People think that they're free lawyers. We're not. Sometimes your clients will need to pay back an amount of legal aid to the government, all right? The amount that they are required to pay back is set by legal aid services, not by the lawyers. Although legal aid would generally set out kind of a payment arrangement of say $10, $15 a week, depending on your client's particular circumstances. So remember that legal aid requires you to have some kind of status in New Zealand. Secondly, it requires you to be under a certain income. And thirdly, and this is the one where people forget, is that legal aid will only be granted if the lawyer that you go to see believes that your case has a good prospect of success, okay? So, or that you need to be a part of the proceeding. So legal aid isn't just kind of, well, I don't have the money, therefore I need it. You also need to satisfy legal aid services that the case that you're wanting to run is worth getting a grant of legal aid for, okay? So it's just those three things. To be honest, it's almost, if there's domestic violence or there are court proceedings, legal aid will almost always be granted, because realistically everyone needs access to justice, And so your legal aid lawyer should be petitioning very strongly for you to get legal aid so that you've got representation. All right, for a lot of our migrant communities and our vulnerable victims of family violence, your legal aid lawyer should be pushing, okay, for you to get this access to funding, because obviously this is how we get justice in New Zealand. So if your legal aid lawyer says no, there's no prospect of success, I would really question that, because the service is here for you to use. And I just want to kind of put a disclaimer on that, is that legal aid is there to be used. And if your lawyer is saying, nah, this is a waste of time, I would push back or find another legal aid lawyer. Yeah, so the legal aid thresholds are set out online. You can find them on the community law website. They've got the threshold, the income threshold, and the threshold increases depending on how many dependents you have, okay? If your client is on a benefit, they're almost always going to qualify for legal aid. It gets tricky when they earn a little bit more money though. So just be aware of it. Have a look online to see if your client's going to qualify. And yeah.
So folks, that's the essence of our presentation. So hopefully, we've been able to define what family violence is, illustrate or just give you guys a preview in terms of what tools are available, what protections and rights are available for migrants, looking at special visa classes, and then also just answer questions in regards to eligibility and legal aid and services available here. So I know Shirleen will touch a little bit more on the services that her respective organisation provide for your community at large, but the essence of these kind of seminars is that we provide tools that are best utilised and best applicable to your respective clients. So pass it over to Shirleen.